Hello and welcome to Ableton Production Tutorial's very first tutorial. For this very first tutorial, we're going to be taking a look at Dynamic Tube and how it can work and some of the things that it can do on your tracks. So, to start off, let's take a look and let's just drag a Dynamic Tube in and let's look at all of the different features. So as you can see, starting in the upper left is our wet-dry mix, which if you're looking actually over here and down in the lower left-hand corner, if you look at this info view, it will actually tell you most of the basic information about effects, but let's go over it anyways just to get really clear. So you got a dry-wet mix, which is just if it's all the way over here at 100%, then it's affecting things fully, and if it's at 50%, then it's letting half the signal through unaffected, and the other half is being affected by the effect. Pretty standard. The output, this just affects the output volume of the dynamic tube. The drive effect, what this does is this is a really main controller. It controls basically how hard it's driving. So basically, if you're turning this up, you're getting more and more distortion. If you're turning this down, you're getting less distortion on your effect. The tone basically affects where the distortion is taking place in the frequency spectrum. So if you're turning it down here, then this is more affecting your bass frequencies, and you're getting more of this low-end distortion. And if you're turning it up high, then you're getting high-end distortion. The bias is another huge effect. What this does is it affects the linearity of your distortion. So if it's at 0%, you're still having, what's happening is a very, very linear kind of sound. What the bias effect sounds like when it's set to a very low setting, this just sounds almost like you're running your mix through like a simple analog mixer, and it just adds just a touch of a little bit of analog kind of warmth to your sound. But if you turn your bias way, way up, then it starts to get more like a distortion effect, more like a saturation effect. The envelope effect, this means that you can have basically envelopes. So if you have really sharp transients going into your dynamic tube, you can affect how it affects them. So you can make it so if you have a sharp envelope, then it will distort more when it's hitting really harshly, or you can make it distort less. So it's a way you can either smooth out or sharpen your distortions, especially with things that have lots of transients. And the attack and release time just affect the envelope there. So let's take a look at how this can actually, a sound source and what it can really do to the sound. Real quick, I just want to say dynamic tube is a very mild effect. This is more of an effect that you would use kind of in the very final stages of the production on your track, just to add a little bit of grit or to add just a little bit of kind of analog sound to maybe smooth something out just a little bit. So in this case, let's take a look at, here we have a cello that I've, just a little MIDI loop, and it's just a simple little 4-bar progression. There's SFZ, is their sound font player. It's a crazy, amazing thing, and I just applied a little bit of compression on it, and I've just made it just a little bit louder to drive it toward tube. So let's take a listen. So it's a very simple sound, so let's see what we can do with it with dynamic tube. Okay, so what we've done with dynamic tube here is we basically just added just a very small amount of kind of grit sound to it. So if you listen, so you can tell that what I've done is If you listen to it, I think it actually sounds worse with dynamic tube turned on here. But this is the reason why there's a wet dry here, is so if you have this as cello and you want to maybe smooth it out, or you want to add just this little bit of high frequency dynamics in your mix, you want to add just a little more bite to it, what you can do is you put this in and you turn down the wet dry. So most of the signal here is coming through, but you see it sounds quite dry. And it's just adding just a little bit of grit. And I'll say that though this may not sound like this would work well in a mix, if you have a track that already has a lot of distorted sounds, a really harsh bass kick, this often works really well. So let's take a look at some other things that we can do with it. For example, here we have this cheesy harmony that I've written. And something that we can do is we can look at what, we can make this bit more interesting with dynamic tube. You can see that it makes it sound almost like a phaser effect. And feel free to look at all of the settings that I've used here. Just take a moment. Something I've done is I found that there's another thing I forgot to mention here is this affects the type of tube. So these are things to play with. Sometimes one sounds a little bit better. You can sound this one sounds a bit more kind of analog-y. See, in this one, because it doesn't have that quite so smooth distortion profile, you end up with a little bit more distortion on that one. Actually, you can hear it. So it's again, this is a very mild effect, but you can see that it's kind of enhanced and given this extra overtone to our harmony here. So let's take another look. Here's my cheesy bass line that I wrote. So, not so interesting, but you can see that I got, this is it without the dynamic tube on. And then when we add dynamic tube, it adds just a bit of harshness, a little distortion, and then we can balance it depending on how much we really want. That's with it off. Really pure sounding, but maybe we want a little bit of grit, a little distortion. And you can use dynamic tube even on things like a kick drum to change its sound. Listen. So here's a pretty standard kick. And if we turn on dynamic tube, we change its sound. So here we end up with, this sounds almost like a hard style kick, really distorted. So if we wanted to make this just a little bit more gritty again. And that's hard to hear unless you have, a good set of speakers or headphones, because you can really hear the difference. So another cool effect is to use, since it's affecting things with dynamics, is to combine with sidechain compression. And this is a pretty cool effect that I just figured out. So let's listen to our cheesy harmony with the kick. And now let's add the distortion. You can see that we're pushing over that little distortion envelope dynamically with the pumps of the kick drum. So you can see how that's really working there. And the same thing is true with our bass line. And that adds just a little bit of interest. not the greatest sounding thing ever, but that wraps it up for this first Ableton production tutorials. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you're interested in any more tutorials, Ableton production tutorials will have a complete set of tutorials for every single effect in Ableton Live posted on abletonproductiontutorials.com. Click the link at the bottom of this video. Thank you.